Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining again for another On This Day in Canadian Military History live stream. Sorry about that. I had another one just last night, so we're going 2 in less than 24 hours, which I do enjoy. But today is going to be very different and all the great work that they do and problems. Oh, we're back. Yeah, sorry about that. My internet is fighting me a little. It should be okay, though. Anyway, so today we'll get started then. Is a really interesting one. So it's a great project put on by Jocke Hallberg from Sweden. So add another country to the cap of On This Day in Canadian Military History about Swedes generally in Canadian service in the CEF during First World War. But we may branch out from there. Who knows? As always, ask questions, and I will field those and we'll get those answered if we can and everything. And so as we go, we'll fire away here. So there we go. Thanks for joining me today. Sorry about the little technical glitches there already, but thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brad. And it's really nice to be a guest here with you and together with everyone else who is listening. I hope you can understand me. And if there is any words that I maybe can't pronounce in English, I think that we will sort it out anyway. So
yeah, don't worry about it.
So.
Don't worry about it. I know native English speakers who can't speak as well as you, so don't worry about it. All good. Perfect. So, like I said, this is your project that you're working on Swedes. Well, you said Swedes at the Western Front. You obviously are not just doing Canada. Obviously, you're doing both sides, right? You're doing Germany and all the sides, and the British. Everybody. Anyway, but we can get into that. So we were talking about this before, right? Sweden, I'm sure everyone knows Sweden was neutral during the First World War, also during the Second. So it always leads to, how does someone like you from Sweden get interested in a topic like this and then wanting to do a project like this? How did that come about?
It actually started when I did my latest military course. I'm working in the Swedish Armed Forces as a major right now in the Swedish Engineer Regiment in the southern part of Sweden. And I was about to write an essay in the end of the course, and my subject were the First World War and the Battle of Delville Wood. That was my task to solve. And then I actually did that, and it went okay. And that made me more interested in the First World War. And I went down to Ypres in Belgium with some friends. And when we were there in Ypres, we also saw the last post ceremony. And I looked further into the Vime Memorial. And on the walls there, I actually saw Scandinavian names. So that was the first thing I thought, okay. And actually, I downloaded an app, I think, and I saw there were some Swedish names in this app, and it was actually 7 names. It said it was 7 Swedes on the Vime Memorial, but it actually turned out there is, I think I have found 19 or 20 of them now. So that made me more interested in how can it be like this? Is it from the archives? Is it from that the word Sweden came up? How did they found out this? And more and more. So I decided actually to look more into this, and I started this project in about 2019 in the winter. And I didn't thought this would be so big as it is now. It takes a lot of time from me, but it's really great to work with this, actually.
Yeah, so, I get that project's getting big on you. I understand that one.
Yeah. So that was I started to map down the Swedes that actually participated in the First World War, especially on the Western Front. And to narrow it down a bit, I decided to do this project about those who participated in the Great War, fell at the Western Front, and are buried or commemorated at the Western Front. So that's my limitations in the project. We know now also that there were many more Swedes who participated, or Swedish-born soldiers, so to say. So I decided to do this project, and the main purpose of this is to highlight especially to the Swedes, that we have this part of the Swedish history, that we have
Right.
individuals from Sweden, born in Sweden by Swedish parents, who emigrated and participated in the Great War within their new countries. And I have covered also, of course, the Canadians, those who fought in the Australians, New Zealand forces, American forces, German forces, British forces as well. And there are also some names in the South African units who actually joined the BEF later on also. So there are names that I still out there. And in my project, I have right now about 416 names that I work with.
Wow.
So which fall into this limitations or this project.
Yeah, that's a big number.
Yeah, it is. It is really interesting. And I want to increase the knowledge about where they fought and fell and where they are buried. And my intention is maybe in 2025, I don't know, but that's a goal I have, to write a small guidebook,
right,
or something similar, to make it easier to understand who these individuals were, in which battles they participated, and also, if I can, narrow it down to which area, or which, even sometimes I have the trench names where they fell.
right.
So I can actually point it out, and I started to make that in my project now, as you can see in the second slide, maybe.
So just give you a second here. So you sent me some stuff. We put it together. Again, This photo is on your website, which is just another one of thousands of shocking images from the First World War and the conditions. Right? It's really. Why did you choose this one, if you don't mind me asking?
It was actually free. I found a free photo on the internet, so
that'll do it.
So this is okay to use. This was just a coincidence, and yeah. So
that's a good reason. I mean, there's been lots to talk about that lately. But anyway, so you sent me some stuff from your website, which for everyone watching, it's linked below, along with your Twitter account, which is great because you talk about this stuff and the different people and the different forces. Like, I keep learning things from you, because one day it'll be like, oh, here's a Sweden Canadian service, and then the next day it's an American, and then sometimes it's German. So it's a good broad. How do I say this? It's a broad survey in a narrow way, if that makes any sense to anybody watching. It's a great thing. Anyway, so sorry, we'll get with the slides, because they're really interesting stuff to see.
Yeah. So it's actually it's a nice forum as well, Twitter. I used to put out my small findings out there, and I try to do it in the same way to people to recognize the way I do it also. And I have been to the area, of course, and I have already started. Then this COVID-19 situation came up, and made it more hard to travel. I was the last time I was down there, and it was this summer. And the main areas I will talk about, it's mentioned and underlined with a red line. We will talk about some Swedes who were participating in the area around Ypres, and also northeast of Ypres, Passchendaele area, the Lens area, Arras, Cambrai, and Amiens down there. That's from those places. Now we have a sort of map in front of us to see which region we will zoom into later on, to talk about the individuals who fell
and
there.
for anyone with Canadian knowledge of the First World War, these names are going to stand out.
Yeah,
they are the big
that's
ones,
good.
Right?
Yeah,
Lens
that's
and
good.
Ross are
That's
obviously
good.
Vimy Ridge, so it helps ground a lot of people, which is great.
So we can keep that slide actually, and I just want to mention a couple of minutes of the Swedish Canadian history also. For those maybe you know it, but actually the first Swede in Canada was as it is today. It was more colonial areas, I think. Back at that time, he was there in 1742.
Wow.
So that was the first individual, and it was a person named Paulus Bruzelius. That was the first Swede actually, who went over. And a larger group the larger emigration group who went to Canada was around 1915, 1920, and especially to Winnipeg area for some reason. Yeah, and the reasons can be many, of course, but as you probably know, people or informed about special areas, and the railway also, which was finished in 1885. It made a large impact on this immigration. Of course, it was very important.
Well, and just to add there quickly, real quick aside, why Winnipeg was the biggest center in what was the Northwest Territories at the time, and they were encouraging people from across Europe to come and emigrate and settle in the West. And that included Scandinavia. So that's pretty much why.
Yeah, and the reason there were many reasons. It was quite bad times during that time in Sweden, and it was not work for everyone, and that was one reason. And also poverty was another reason, and the labor situation, of course. So that was some of the reasons that made the Swedes go over to North America, and especially also Canada. From 1885 to 1925, there were around 100,000 Swedes who moved to Canada, and mostly of them moved to the U.S. and then moved up to Canada. And there were some settlements out there in the beginning, like New Stockholm, and there was a Swedish settlement called Scandinavia, and so on. So they took them with it. And also in the province of Saskatchewan, I see a lot of people who came from that region when we talked about Swedes who joined the Canadian forces later on also. Yeah, and as I understand, Canada didn't enter into any conscript system as in 1917 in August, I think it was.
Yeah, so, it doesn't come. It starts with Vimy Ridge because of the high number of casualties, but it doesn't come into a place until very late 1917, like December late, and then picks up in early 1918 and continues on. I mean, I've talked about that on the channel before, but it's quite complicated. But yeah, it's not a 1914 conscription system like all the other countries in Europe did.
And as far as I can see, it's the Swedes did this voluntarily. They joined the army voluntarily. I think that's the most common reason for those soldiers who fought for the Canadian Expeditionary Forces over to France later on.
From out declare war in August to late 1917, they were all volunteers. So that includes everyone.
Yeah. So we can move over to the next slide. I think. Let's see. This is just an example of the Lens Courcelette-Cambrai area. And this is a screenshot from my project that can be reached. It's a Google Earth project. It can be reached through my homepage if you want to see it live, for example, and you can zoom in on every individual. You can click on every individual and read more about the small situations they were in. And that's the main purpose. That's the large thing I work with in the project. And you can see also some different colors, and the red ones, they are Canadians, and the green ones, they are from, in this case, Australian or Anzac Army or Anzac part. Australians and New Zealanders.
Correct.
And you see also an orange one. There is a Brit down there also.
Two there,
who fought. They were, I think I have 6 or 7 who actually fought for the Brits, especially in their army. And there are also crosses over there, black crosses. There is where the individuals are buried. And there are also symbols within this red. They are different year. So the triangular is 1917, and the angle, so to say, or it's 1918, and the star is 1916, and there is there is easy to see how the flow went over to from west to east. Also to see, that's why I have those. And
yeah, that's great. Well, and yeah, it just shows how Canada's war develops, right? Based on where the clusters of casualties are, and that's why I like things like your project. It puts it in a visual way that's easier to understand why everything's so clumped together.
So, and from those things, I can also discover things. I can see, they were quite close. Did they participate in the same unit? Did they fought in the same unit? Did they die on the same day? Okay, did they knew each other? It's quite interesting to see those things and draw things out from this project as well. So I try to do that, but it's not easy, of course. To sometimes the names are mentioned in the diaries, also the unit diaries. There are examples from that, so really interesting to see. And I also have discovered other Swedish names through diaries that I haven't discovered before. So it's really interesting to read the unit diaries. Really interesting to see, to get a grip of what they did.
They're a great source for something like this, or just generally. But yeah, like you said, you can come from it two different ways, right? Which is great.
It comes alive more. Yeah.
Oh, big time.
Yeah. So we can also start with looking into some Canadian Swedes, so to say. Maybe we can look at the other slide. Next slide, I think. Yeah, and this area here, there were a lot of Swedes participating in the Battle of Vimy Ridge, and a lot of Swedes who fell as well, as you can see in the map, and it's interesting. And I will especially look into. You can't see it on the slide, but if you see the Vime Memorial, you have down there, around there. Just outside that one is it's actually two individuals there. You can't see the names because of the zoom when I took the screenshot. So, but there are two individuals back there who fought, and they fell on the same day. It was Private Gunnar Jonas Backlund. He was very young, this guy, and also a guy called Erik Allman. And Allman, it's interesting in many perspectives because it was really hard to find his background. They used a totally different name when they went over and when they filled in the registration form. So it was really hard to find, and I like those things to dig into those to try to find the connection. Mm-hmm. And if I just mention some of the information about those two individuals, for example. Gunnar Jonas Backlund. He was born up in the northern part of Sweden called Umeå parish. And I start to see a pattern. Most of the Canadians came from the northern part of Sweden, even if we are mixed. But many soldiers who went over actually fell on the Western Front are from the northern part of Sweden. If you divide it in half. So why it is like that, I don't know. Maybe they found themselves in a same cultural situation, or they recognize the landscape or whatever. It seems to be on the
I don't know. Same Canada seems to attract northernness. I don't.
Or maybe the rumor spread up there north and from family to family. I don't know. It can be many reasons. Yeah. And he was born in Sweden December 10th in 1889, and he emigrated with his family, with whole family. There is about 50-50. Many of the Swedes also went over alone. Mm-hmm. And there were different situations, but many also went over with the whole family. And they did that already in 1893. So he was only about 4 years old or something. So he was quite young when he came to Canada. And so that's not so usual. That's quite unusual, but he was quite young. And they lived in, his next of kin lived in Toulon, Manitoba. And Jonas later on lived in Winnipeg. So the family lived maybe in Winnipeg, and then he went over and then moved up to, the family moved up or moved. I don't know the exact direction. And he also became naturalized, Jonas. And he fought in the Battle of Vime Ridge. And he was first reported to be missing in action. But now they have stated that he was killed in action. But his name is on the Vime Memorial still. So they haven't found him or anything. So
right, because the Vime Memorial lists all those killed in France who have no known grave. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And if we look into Erik Allman, for example, I just mentioned these two individuals because they died on the same day, but they were not fighting in the same unit as I see it now. No, he didn't. If we talk about a bit of Erik Allman, he is an example of that has been hard to find facts from, but I have found all it now. So his name was actually called Erik Axel. He had 3 names, and his surname was Arman, not Allman, as it said like that. And he was born up very far up north in Kvikkjokk parish in Norrbotten, as it's called in Swedish. So he was born in 1882, the 14th of November. I had a very little information when I tried to search for him in the Swedish church books. I knew his sister's name was Sofia, and in the papers it said Sofia Allman as well, but it's actually Sofia Arman as well, and it's mentioned, for example, a village like Fristad, Freistadt. It's actually mentioned, and it was really hard to find because there are Freistadts in Sweden, but not connected to these names. But I found them because Freistadt is actually Vrikstad, and it's about 45 minutes from me. Oh, wow. So it's so his sister lived down here in the southern part of Sweden, and then after finding her, I could actually track it back to the family and find Erik with his correct name, and also through his father's name, which I found on the casualty card documents.
Right, also as the next of kin, I would assume.
Yeah. So he was mentioned actually with his Amund Anders. So that was also the reason what I found them. And he lived at an hotel in Vancouver.
Yeah.
Before he was registered for the Canadian Expeditionary Forces.
Yeah, that's not surprising because that happened quite frequently. Because again, we don't know, depending on circumstances of enlistment or where he was, or at the time, right? I've seen that. I've seen boarding houses, all of that kind of stuff, or somewhere, a city they had in Canada, I mean, no connection to at all, because that's just what they listed. Because when they were enlisting, again, like with the name change, it can be for all kinds of reasons that we'll probably, for some of these people, we'll never know.
And these situations, when I search through different archives, is give me experience, of course, to the next person. So I learn a lot from this, to dig into different archives and try to find the different links. And it's really interesting to find the correct individual, actually, to pin it down and look, oh, hey, here they lived. I found the house, and I can see on the map where the house were, and I can start the trip from where they were born, where they lived in Sweden, track them to Canada, track them back again to the battlefield and where they are today. That's I find that very interesting to do that. And he fought probably as a volunteer in the 102nd Infantry Battalion. And he was killed in action in the Battle of Vime Ridge, April 9th, 1917, as many others, of course. Yes. And he is buried in the Bois Carré British Cemetery in Toulouse. I hope I pronounce it correctly. Yeah, you see it there also. Exactly. So that was an example of how I can dig in and find connections just with putting them on the map and see the connections between different individuals or areas or whatever also.
Yeah, it's great.
So if we can take the next slide, I think it is the next slide, I think. this is also I
London,
think
maybe
this,
still.
yeah, I think
Yeah, you
this
want,
is,
yeah, Passchendaele.
yeah, here we are now. So just to give an example also from the area, because I have mapped now those who fell in Belgium. And my intention is to continue my travel down to France next year. Oh, this year.
Yeah,
We have
this year
past
now.
New
Yep.
Year also. So I hopefully in June I will go down to the Fleurs area and also Armentières and continue my documentation of the sites where the Swedes fell and so on, where they are buried, and taking pictures of their headstones and such. And this will be material for my book, of course, also. So we look into 3 individuals who actually fought in the Battle of Mont Sorel. It's south of Ypres, and it's also interesting to see that, because they didn't fell on the same day, but they participated in the same battle. And those 3 individuals who were Louis John Engström, and Louis John is actually Lars Johan in Swedish. So I have also made my own name convention for finding. So if your name is Lars in Sweden, you will probably have the name Louis in
Right.
if you go to North America. And I found that quite interesting as well. Anders, for example, is Andrew.
Yes.
So it's so I have to make my own name convention to look up there.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, you got to do like a almost
And that's,
translation.
he was also quite hard to find, but I found him due to this knowledge that, okay, maybe his name is Lars Johan, and then I found him. So Eric Carlson also fought, and Martin Svedberg. Those 3 individuals, they fought in the same battle. That's an example of also I can find out. And then from there, I can also try to find out more information about the battle, where they were, and so on and so on. And if I mention some facts about those individuals, this is also a screenshot, and this is you can find the project at my homepage, of course, as I said before. Louis John states that he is born in Peterborough in Ontario. And that makes it okay, but I found documents that said he was born in Sweden, so I tried to dig it down, and he is born in Sweden. He is born in Storsjö, Jämtland, up north in Sweden, November 25th in 1891. He emigrated to North America in 1909, and he fought like several other Swedes in the first Canadian mounted rifles. And I can see some patterns sometimes. Some of the soldiers fought in the Canadian mounted rifles when they have been into the Hussars before in the Swedish army. So there are some connections also. They probably tried to use the knowledge from the soldiers that they had before. So
well, that makes perfect sense, right? Because I'll give you a little bit of a break here. Is they asked, right, if you had previous military experience when they enlisted. So someone serving in a Hussars unit would set off the light bulb in the recruiter, for especially depending on where they're enlisting, right? Because it's regionally done. But the mounted rifles, of course, don't stay mounted rifles and become frontline infantry, just like all the other battalions, which is probably not what a lot of them wanted, but that's what happened. So it's really interesting. And I wonder if we have a question. We talked about it a little bit, but I wanted to frame it from Scott, who's a great supporter of the channel. Is there any documented reasons? Like, have you found any journals or letters or anything from anyone just very briefly talking about this at all, why they did it? Or
no, I have tried to see that, but I think it's actually so easy that they live there, and I have found some American documents that say those Swedes who fought for America did that. They wanted to pay back in a way, because how they have been treated in the country, and also if they found their new country very well, and they were well suited, and that's why they thought, okay, I will do this for my country where I live now. I think it is so easy right now. There is no research behind those words, but that's my own thoughts. But
right, which is not
really
unsurprising. I mean, I've known from veterans or from accounts, and I'm just talking generally, depending on what, doesn't matter really where they're from. At some points, it's just like it's what you did. It's just that's why you just did it, because that's what you did at the time. And I think that doesn't, that goes across national and linguistic boundaries in many ways.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think that's But as you get further and further into this, you're going to come across things, I would imagine. So I'm sure that's a question that'll be answered in time in some cases.
Exactly. I will look into that more. I think you can take the picture of the map from the trench map or the diary. You can take, if you have that one of Mount Sorel.
Oh yeah, you want to go to that one? Yeah.
Change that to Slido. Yeah.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, the trench.
And he was actually fighting in the area of maple copse wood. Yep. So it's in the middle of the map. You can see it in the green. You can do that. You can zoom in if you want to. Yeah, maple copse. You have it in the middle. He was up there in this, and this is a map of the region. And Mont Sorel you have down south in the sketch. Just left of the word Canadian Corps, left a little bit up, you have that.
So here's Maple Copse, and then
the and you have Sanctuary Wood, Observation Ridge, Sanctuary Wood, and so on, for people who has been down there.
And these terms, as well, maybe particularly as I think mostly North Americans watching, when they say mount and hill, it's particularly in Flanders, it's a very liberal interpretation of what a mount means. It's
exactly
it's pretty. It's a slightly hill for Sweden. Yeah, they're pretty small in comparison to what we have.
Yeah. It's a ridge, more like a ridge.
Yeah, it's just funny. I think it's just funny.
Yeah, and if we look into Erik Karlsson, for example, his name was Karl Erik, and he was called Erik Karlsson, and he kept his surname as it is also, the correct spelling and everything. He was born in Stockholm, March 22, 1889. And the church book says he went to sea around 1908. So a lot of the Canadian soldiers or the Swedes were sailors also. Especially when we look into those who fought for Australia or New Zealand. Almost everyone is a sailor, and that explains the immigration to those countries, more like it. So he worked at sea, and he volunteered into the Canadian Army, and he enlisted in Vernon, I think it's spelled, in 1915. Vernon, British Columbia, yeah. Maybe directly from his work as a sailor, but he came in probably from Vancouver. I found papers. He came in from the sense. Yeah. He fought for the 7th Canadian Infantry Battalion, and he was killed in action June the 13th, 1916, in the Battle of Mont Sorel also.
Mm-hmm.
So, and also if we look into Martin Svedberg, he was actually, his name was Carl Martin Larsson. So I tried to find out how he took his name Svedberg, but I have found some information about that. So he was born up north in Borgsjö, Medelpad, for those Swedes who may be listening, in Sweden, in May 26, 1876.
Oh, wow.
So he was quite old if you compare to the other ones. Yeah. And most of of those 416 soldiers that I have in my research, the average age is 28.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Fell. Yeah. So he was quite old if I compare them, and he emigrated to North America in 1893. He was 17 years old, and he did it with a whole family. He lived with his family up in Wadena, I think, in Saskatchewan. Can it be like that? Yeah.
Yeah.
He joined the Canadian Expeditionary Forces in August 1915, and he fought with the 16th Infantry Battalion in the area of Mont Sorel, Hill 61 and Hill 62, which is north of those.
Yep.
positions. Yes.
And where the monument is today. Yeah.
Yeah, and he is believed to have been killed around 11th or 14th of June 1916. They don't know really. And but now he is actually stated to have been killed June 13th at an age of 40. He was quite old. His name is on the Menin Gate, and a lot of names in Menin Gate. And if we look at the other ones, Louis John is also on Menin Gate, and Martin Svedberg, and Eric Carlson. He is buried in the railway dugout
Okay.
up near closer to Ypres. It's a really
Yeah,
nice
I've been there.
cemetery
I've been there
up
myself with Dave Patterson. Dave Patterson who's watching. It was on last night. He was the tour guide.
Yeah.
We went there because Mark Milner, the other tour guide. Sorry, it's a bit of an aside, everyone, but Mark Milner, he had a relative is buried at railway dugouts. So I've been there myself. So yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Yes, I will just look into my notes again, and and if we go further on to see some fate of some soldiers who has been interesting, we can go further on in the picture slides. There are some more zooms into Courcelette, and there are, as you can see, as I explained before, it's from the 1916 area, and we all know what happened there if we have read our history, and it's quite interesting because it's to read those diaries. They sometimes point out the trench where they were, so it's quite easy to find and point out where they were, and it's really interesting to go there with a trench map or whatever to be and actually be in the area. That is a very interesting thing for me, to be in the same area where they were.
Yeah, it's quite an experience. Again, I've been here as well, and for Courcelette, and I had Paul Reed on the channel a couple months ago, or a couple weeks. I don't remember anymore. COVID has made time difficult to remember. Anyway, we talked about Courcelette because he lived there for a number of years, literally in the village, and we talked about it and the names, especially like you can see them here, right? Regina Trench, Desire Trench. These names stick out in Canadian military history in more ways than many of the other ones because these are the objectives for such a long time.
Yeah,
the area itself, is quite well noted. So it's not unsurprising that would be noted in the war diaries.
Yes, and we can go to the next slide, I think.
In Cambrai.
There's also some, there's more a zoom into to Cambrai area. Also, a lot of Swedish Canadians who fell, and you can see also it's when then we are in 1918. The battles would take place in the 100 Days Offensive and further on east and such. It's very interesting to read, and I have actually, it's not on the map but there are two officers or two you can say that, two soldiers from my regiment where I work today, but it was a Hussar regiment at that time, and they have been walking in the stairs in my regiment. It's quite interesting to know.
Wow!
And they did their military career there, and one was a lieutenant. He fought on the German side, and he died already in 1916 in this area. I haven't pointed him out though in the map, and I will do that. But this is for Commonwealth. This map. Right. And there also was another man who they didn't met each other because the other one died 5 days before 11th of November, and he died in his barracks. So he was hit by shrapnel when they were asleep. So that was quite tragic as well. But we can continue to next slide.
Yeah, I just want to point this out before, but when you sent me these and I was putting it together, because this is another. I was talking about this last night. How Calvin Ord and the push to Cambrai is a really interest of mine. I just quickly looked at it because I was just plugging into PowerPoint, and I knew that this was Canal du Nord Cambrai because of Bourlon Wood, because of the brutal nature of the fighting there, and I knew this clump automatically was Bourlon Wood without even having to look, based on the number of casualties. So it's just it's another way of I'm saying this and why, again, I'm just going to keep, because your project is great and I'm going to use it in the future for sure. I'm going to use your work and take a little bit of credit. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to use it for things in the future because it's just such a good database and to understand it.
Yeah, it is. I will fill it in also. I will put more into it.
Oh, yes, please do. Fill that thing up.
Do.
But I was going to say, for someone who may not, have that sort of academic background like I have, or who's, understands it from, say, the more reading of it, literally reading books and things, this is a great way to understand things because of how the way you've mapped it makes perfect sense. So it's you can understand these things just broadly from such a unique and, what's the word I'm looking for? And, in such detail in a way, right? It gives you a bigger picture than just, individuals, but it also gives you the individuals, which is amazing. Sorry. Anyway, we'll continue. I just wanted to say that because it's a great thing that it's hard to do this with a book, right? It's not the same.
No, it's not us at all. It does. Yeah.
I know it's a lot more flexibility to do this. But
we will look into another individual. He's quite interesting. His background is quite interesting. I have underlined it with a red line there. It's John Oscar Lindell. And when I found him in the papers and I tried to look more into his history, I found a quite interesting fate of him and about him. And we will later on show a map also where this is. He fell in the trenches near Halluu in the Battle of Amiens, and quite far east in that battle.
Yeah.
And you can also go to if you want to, you can go to next slide. There is some text about John Oscar Lindell. And he was born in 27th of December in 1884 in Malmö, in Skåne, southern part of Sweden, quite close to Denmark. And he left Malmö in 1901. It said here he left in 1901, but actually he left in 31st of October 1902. So some of the data, this is from the internet, this page. I wanted to take it in, but this is a page from internet. And that's also, sometimes you can't rely on every information that is out there, of course, that. But some information this is not a big case, of course, 1 year or so. But if someone actually looking for information, it's you have to be quite critical sometimes. And I found he didn't leave in 1901. He left 1902 to Manitoba in Canada, and he was enlisted in July 1915 for the 78th Battalion Canadian Infantry. He fell, as I said before, in the area of Halluu, east of Amiens, in the Battle of Amiens, as I understand it. At first, his name was at the Vime Memorial, but in his remains were actually found in 2007, and it was confirmed to be John Oscar Lindell in 2014, with different techniques of DNA and such. And it's an amazing thing. Imagine to find these remains there, and he were, as the text say, discovered on a private property in Halluu, and 5 more also were found at the same time, and one of those were John Oscar Lindell. That gives a quite interesting story to has been found, and his family were down there. Probably his family from Canada, maybe, or some ancestors. I don't know from which side, because his name was John Oscar Håkansson, actually. His surname was Håkansson. And he got the name Lindell, probably from his mother's new husband in Canada.
Yeah.
So that's also a way of researching things. Lindell wasn't his name in Sweden, so it makes it sometimes hard to find the correct individuals. And sometimes they, as we saw before, they say that they are born in a different place, and they can't actually sometimes know the age as well. So I have to really guess sometimes, and so they have, especially when they move when they are young. They don't. They just guess sometimes, and then it's very hard to find them in the Swedish church book. So
I've had that myself, where the birth date is seemingly just made up. they have the right year, but it seems they just randomly pick something, and then someone else has done research into it, and it's not even close, which has happened to me a few times, which is interesting.
And also the parents' name also changes sometimes. His mother's name was Nilla, and she's called Nelly in Canada, of course, but very natural.
I mean, names change for, like we said, for all. Another thing, and just a bit of an aside here, but I think it's worth noting is, particularly from outsiders' perspectives of Canada, sometimes can be a bit skewed. We were presented as this welcoming nation, which we are in many ways, but back at this time, not so welcoming.
Exactly.
Lots of discrimination. So, and against a lot of different people. And so name changes were done a lot of the time for that reason, and that reason alone. And it makes perfect sense why someone would try to not get past, but change a surname, or especially a first name that's not, the typical English British name, which happened quite frequently, and not even to so many immigrants basically not from the British Isles, basically.
And as you say, that's interesting, because that's also, I have read about it in Eleanor Barr's book about the invisible immigrants, Swedes in Canada. And it's really interesting to see, because they were not treated very well, those who came home again to Canada. They were stated to take the labor or work from Canadians. And also there were a slight opinion about the Swedes were connected to Germany, as it's easy to think that, and also easy to understand that, because we had our reasons, and I think Sweden did what they thought was the best for them in these sites, and also during the Second World War. And
sorry, that just makes me think of something else, because that's a great point, because anything to have this sort of connection to Germany is obviously presented as bad. And this leads me to think of something else, is in Toronto, after the war, there was a riot in what is still the Greek town part of Toronto. Greece was an ally of the Allied powers, or the Entente powers, and they still rioted, seeing they're giving their reasoning is because they were an enemy country. Obviously, it's just racism and hatred, but it's just they make this up. So they're an enemy. I'm like, Greece was an Allied power for a good chunk of the war, so it's just these justifications of hatred, and it's not surprising that the Swedes face this as well.
So that was also so this is an interesting case, this individual, and I maybe will find more like this, and it gives a perspective, and it gives a story to an individual. And as I said, my main reason doing this is actually to highlight and the individuals, what they did. They were born, they emigrated, and they sometimes emigrated very far away from there. And imagine those trips. Imagine to emigrate to the state of Washington, for example, amazing to cross the country and find a new, and then it's wartime, and then decide, okay, I will go back again, and then be wounded in action or killed in action. It's I think it's amazing in a way, and in the end now I have some words about another example. It's when I research a person who was stated as Conrad Allison, and
do you want me to go forward in slides? Sorry.
Yeah, you can go forward. I don't think I have him. Yeah, here is also. Sorry, this is.
Yeah, there's a Lou right there.
Lou is. Yeah, you see there. There were John Oscar Lindell, where he fell in those region, in that region. So it's a quite interesting part of the battlefield down south there, quite down south. Even if it's not so. Yeah. And this is only when we talk about the project again. This is just the maps of those who fell for the Commonwealth, and I have also a project for those who fell at the Meuse Argonne offensive. I have about 100 Swedes there also, who fought for the American Expeditionary Forces, and that's also another project made in the same way, but more connected to one battle, more like that.
Well, it's a massive battle for the American Expeditionary Force. So
and this I don't think if we have any more slides.
There's one left.
Yeah, here, of course, nice. I just want to show an example of a note in the newspapers.
Mm-hmm.
In my research, I have found very usable and a lot of information in old digitized newspapers, especially Swedish newspapers from America. And as you can see, this is the Swedish American from February 7th in 1918. And this is the information about Louis John Engström when he fell. And that also very good information for me when researching the individuals. I can see here probably suddenly it's a village named in the newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
And it says also that his mother's name is mentioned there, but it isn't actually Ingrid Olsson. It's Ingrid. I think it's Inger actually. So you can't rely on that actually, but the places are more or less spelled out correctly. So that gives me a very good thing to have as a base in my research. And it says that he was 18 or 19 years old, but he wasn't actually. He was much older. So sometimes the information is not correct. Mm-hmm. So it's he was about, I think, if I find him in my database here, I can see, for example, Engström. Yeah, he was 24 when he died. So it's also a picture of that they lost the contact with their sons and everything, or with they just knew the latest information. And because if you get this, that he died actually when he was 18 or 19, then you can use that, but then you don't get that in the correct information. That's an example. Right. And I have a lot of those notes from newspapers that helps me a lot. And yeah. And,
so that's the end of the slides.
Yeah. And the last thing I want to say also, it's about that some cases are really hard sometimes to find, but I managed to do it. And quite interesting is one thing that was common in Sweden at those days was that the surname of the individuals were taken from their father's first names. So Eriksson, for example, then probably their father was Eric. So that's also a kind of a good knowledge to have, and when researching. And Conrad Allison was also very interesting because his I can see here in my database. Let's see where we have him. Yeah. His name was actually Conrad Vitalis Leonard. And that made me quite easy to find him. After I have found out who he was, I found him easily in the church books, because those other names is not common at all.
Right.
And Allison comes from the Swedish, his father's name was Elias. So it comes from Allison like that. So that was just an example. And just to make this, to end this talk with my research, this was an example of the Canadians. And of course, I do research about the other ones as well. And I try to and I put it out on my webpage a lot, and also on Twitter. So on Twitter, I make probably some post every day. So that's where I put all my information, and I always put it on the web page as well. So this was some words about the Swedes who went into the Canadian Expeditionary Forces during World War I and fell at the Western Front. Perfect. And in my database, I have 105 Canadians.
105, yeah. Yeah, that's great. I mean, giving stories to names is always appreciated. We have a few questions for you, if that's all right. I think I know the answer to this, but maybe we can talk a little bit about this because we have a few minutes left. The files, because those are all available now, right, online. I assume you've made good use of those for those who you found.
Yeah. I always I look very much into the libraries and archives in the Canadian library and archives. Yes, I do. That's a huge database, of course, and very good database as well.
Mm-hmm.
Really good. And I have looked into every single documents about those individuals.
Yeah, and sorry, I'm just going through, make sure I didn't miss anything. But if people have questions, I have to run in a few minutes. But
Yeah.
some time. Well, question for me, something I was just thinking about is because you mentioned the impetus of the project and why you're doing what you're doing, and those who fell. Have you in any way come across those who didn't, and maybe been from Sweden and then went back to Canada or the US or something else? Is there a couple of those stories at all, or?
There are a lot of individuals who fought for the American Expeditionary Forces. I think there were about 60,000 maybe, and wow. That quite. So there are about. I have 230 Americans, Swedes in my database who fell. So that's quite few of them, but it's they serve to be. How do you say? I want to enlighten that there are Swedes on the ground or buried or missing in action, actually. So that's the main thing of the project also.
Yeah, especially from, well, it's a common thread that everyone's aware of. And you mentioned the men in gate many times of how many have no known grave. Like, I mean, it's massive. Like you said, you were looking at the men in gate and you started to notice names. But you missed a bunch because it's just literally physically so big. And then the memorial on the Somme, if for you're looking at, say, British units, because all the Canadian names are Vimy, the FIPAL memorial is even bigger. Like, the thing is massive with all of these names. It's almost overwhelming in a sense when you're looking at it.
Yeah, you can read more also in my post in July at the webpage. If you go down to from the post from July, then you can read more about the Canadians that we have talked about as well.
Yeah, and again, like I said before, though, everything is linked down below. Your Twitter, which I learned, like I said before, I've learned a ton from, and just learning different, because there's always different ways of approaching topics, and this is why I like what you do, because you're approaching it, like I said, in a unique, very detailed way, but it provides clues and new perspectives on the much bigger picture, which I think we can all benefit from. And particularly as I have quite a few American viewers that are very strong supporters of the channel, the United States, for all kinds of reasons, doesn't seem to focus on the First World War so much. And so anything this is my personal opinion, the more that they focus on the First World War, the better, because I think the impacts on the United States from that war are massive and just not even thought about in the slightest. So looking at using, I don't know, if your project, I guess what I'm trying to say is if your project's a gateway for people to learn, it's amazing, because anyone who does anything like this is in my good books, and using your stuff has been amazing. And I'm going to use it more because I'm going to start trying to do some different stuff and how I go about doing my posts and things like that, and using different sources, because I'm starting to get kind of bored with what I use. So I want to try some different stuff. And this is great, a great way to do it. And your website's so easy to use, which is also amazing. And I love maps, as I'm sure a lot of people watching do, because maps are always good.
Me too. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so we're getting lots of good comments. People are very, very appreciative for you doing this and helping them out with other things and giving new perspectives. So that is really good. Okay, we don't have any more questions. I think we got them all, so that's good. So I'll just do a quick wrap up, and then we'll say bye together, and then we'll sign off. So I'll just go back to me for a minute. So thanks everyone again for watching the live stream today. Very, very different topic that I really, really enjoyed learning more about from online here, and getting to talk about this stuff from the person who created it, which is always an amazing thing. So again, if you like the channel and you haven't so far, please do subscribe. That helps me. The more I have, the better. Also, liking and commenting down below is good. And check out the links again that I put in there for the project. So please do that. Again, if you want to keep seeing more of this and like what I do, you can support me through Patreon. The links are down below. And lots of you are already. So, and getting a few more really helps. Everyone I have helps me do this more and more and bring you new stuff and in different ways. Especially hopefully soon with COVID ending, I can start to broaden how I do stuff. Let's hope that happens. So again, check out the Patreon account. There's lots of good stuff on there if you do sign up, and you get lots of extra benefits. So do check that out. So thanks again, everyone. So thanks again for coming on. Really appreciated taking the time and giving us the detail of everything you've done. So thanks again. And maybe we'll have you back on when you've done some more after you've been to France again. Hopefully COVID doesn't ruin those plans for you like they've done for so many others. But maybe once you've got there, you can give us some more insights or when you get the book done.
Of course, I will. Thank you very much.
Yeah, really, thank you for taking the time. So I will see everyone later. There's more live streams coming next week. So keep an eye on that for my announcements. And I'll see everybody next time.